I was standing in my cramped little kitchen in Boise, Idaho, cradling a mug of chamomile tea that was just starting to cool. The sun was dipping low, painting the Owyhee Mountains outside my window in shades of crimson and gold. It was one of those quiet moments I'd fought hard to carve out for myself. Peaceful, simple, mine. Then my phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp little jolt that broke the stillness. I glanced at it, expecting a text from Matt about picking up Lily from daycare, or maybe a client nagging me about a photo deadline. But no, it was a message from my dad, Richard Monroe. My heart did this weird flip as I read it. Abby, your mom and I would love for you, Matt, and Lily to come home to Seattle for Christmas. It's been 8 years, honey. We miss you. I nearly dropped the mug right there. Tea sloshed over the rim, burning my fingers, but I barely noticed. 8 years. 8 damn years without a single call, not a text, not even a lousy birthday card, and now they wanted me to waltz back into their lives like nothing happened? I set the mug down hard, the clink echoing in the empty kitchen, and stared out at those mountains again. They stood there, steady and silent, like they were daring me to figure this out. Was this some kind of twisted prank? A guilt trip? My mind was already spinning, digging up old dirt I'd spent years trying to bury. I'm Abigail Monroe, Abby to anyone who matters, 32 years old, a freelance photographer scraping by on shots of rugged landscapes and the occasional wedding gig. I live in a modest house on the edge of Boise with my husband, Matt Donovan, who's 34 and teaches high school history from our cluttered dining room table most days. Then there's our daughter Lily, 3 years old and a tornado of giggles and sticky fingers. We're not rolling in money, but we've got something better. Each other. A little family I built from scratch after the one I was born into decided I wasn't worth keeping. That message from Dad hit me like a brick. I was still standing there staring at my phone when Matt walked in, his boots thudding softly on the hardwood. He'd just gotten back from the store. Lily's daycare pickup was still an hour away, and he stopped short when he saw my face. "Everything okay, Abs?" he asked, his voice low and careful, like he could already sense the storm brewing. I let out a dry laugh, holding up the phone so he could see the screen. My family wants us to come to Seattle for Christmas. Out of the blue. 8 years of nothing, and now this. Matt's eyebrows shot up and he crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. Seattle? As in, your parents? The ones who... He didn't finish, but he didn't have to. He knew the story. Every ugly detail I'd spilled to him over late-night beers when we first started dating. What do they want? No clue, I said, tossing the phone onto the counter like it might bite me. But I'm not buying the "we miss you" line. They don't get to play happy family after all this time. He nodded, his jaw tightening just a little. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, you know that, right? Yeah, I muttered, but my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. I picked up my tea again, taking a sip even though it'd gone lukewarm. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend it never happened, but another part, the stubborn, curious part, couldn't let it go. Why now? What were they after? I'd spent 8 years building walls around my life, and with one text, they'd managed to crack them open just enough to let the doubts creep in. Matt stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. If you're thinking about it, we'll figure it out together, but I'm not dragging Lily into some drama fest unless you're sure. I managed a small smile, leaning into his touch. I'll sleep on it. Maybe I'll text back something vague. Buy some time. But even as I said it, I knew sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. That message was a ghost rattling chains in my head, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't going anywhere until I faced it. I grew up in Seattle, in a house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. 2 stories, red brick, a front yard so neat it could have been mowed with a ruler. My family was the kind people envied from the outside. Dad, Richard Monroe, was 58 now, but back then still had that sharp lawyer edge. Tall, graying at the temples, always in a suit that screamed money. Mom, Diane, was 56, the perfect wife who ran charity galas and kept the house spotless, her smile polished like a trophy. My older brother Ethan was 35, a doctor with a stethoscope practically glued to his neck, and my twin sister Sophie, same age as me, 32, was the golden child, following Dad into law with her quick wit and perfect grades. Then there was me, Abby, the odd one out, the kid who'd rather hide behind a camera than play the part in their perfect little show. I'd always loved photography. By the time I was 14, I was sneaking out to snap pictures of the Puget Sound at dawn or the gritty corners of downtown, anything that felt real. I'd spend hours in my room, hunched over prints, tweaking exposures until they matched the ache or the hope I felt inside. My family didn't get it. "It's a cute hobby, Abby," Mom would say, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used at fundraisers. Dad was blunter. "You're wasting time when you could be doing something useful." Ethan and Sophie were too busy racking up trophies, basketball for him, debate team for her, to care. I was the ghost in my own house, fed and dressed but invisible where it counted. That sting festered for years, but it wasn't what broke us. The real fracture came when I was 17. I'd started dating Nate, this scruffy guy from school who played guitar on street corners for spare change. He wasn't polished like the boys Sophie brought home, but he had this crooked smile and a way of looking at me that made me feel seen. We'd been together a few months when I worked up the nerve to bring him to dinner. I was a wreck, hands sweaty, stomach in knots, but my family played nice. Dad shook his hand, Mom asked about his music, and Sophie even grinned and said, "Not bad, Abby, you snagged a live one." For once, I thought maybe I'd cracked their code. Then it all went to hell. Almost a year later, my friend Tara caught me outside chem class, her face pale. "I saw Nate last night," she whispered. "At Pike Place, with Sophie. They weren't just talking, Abby. They kissed." My stomach dropped like I'd been sucker punched. I didn't want to believe it, but I tracked Nate down after school, cornered him by the bleachers. He wouldn't look at me at first, just kicked at the dirt with his sneakers. "It's true, isn't it?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He finally met my eyes, and I saw the guilt there plain as day. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he mumbled. "It's been a few months with Sophie. It's different, stronger." I could have handled losing him. Guys like Nate come and go. But Sophie, my twin, the one who knew every secret I'd ever whispered in the dark, that cut deeper than I could have imagined. I stumbled home in a daze, the Seattle drizzle soaking through my jacket, and found her sprawled on the couch like it was any other day, flipping through some law textbook. "What the hell, Sophie?" I yelled, my voice cracking so loud it hurt. She barely glanced up, just arched an eyebrow. "What's your problem now?" "You and Nate," I spat. "How could you?" She shrugged, like it was nothing. "Feelings don't follow rules, Abby. You're too sensitive about everything." That was it. Years of being brushed off, ignored, sidelined. It all boiled over. I stepped forward and slapped her, hard, the sound ricocheting off the walls. She stumbled back, clutching her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. I froze, my hand burning, knowing I'd gone too far, but too mad to care. The house exploded after that. Mom and Dad burst in from the den, their voices crashing over each other. "Abigail, what's wrong with you?" Mom shrieked. Dad towered over me, his face red. "You could have broken her jaw!" Ethan thundered downstairs, grabbing my arm and pulling me back while Sophie just sat there, smirking through the chaos like she'd won something. It was a blur of shouting, a vase smashing on the floor, my pulse hammering so loud I couldn't think straight. Later that night, they called me into the dining room. Dad sat at the head of the table, his glare cold enough to freeze water. Mom stood behind him, arms crossed. "You assaulted your sister," Dad said, his voice flat. "We could press charges, but we won't. Instead, you're going to Boise. Your Uncle Tom's agreed to take you in. We're not letting this ruin our family's name." My jaw dropped. "You don't even care what she did. She stole my boyfriend." Mom cut me off. "Stop being dramatic, Abby. You need to grow up." And that was that. 2 days later, I was shoved into Dad's SUV with a duffel bag and a one-way ticket out of their lives. Sophie didn't even look at me as I left, just sat there with an ice pack on her face like I was the only bad guy in the story. The drive to Boise was silent, the gray sky pressing down on me like a lid. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I'd see them for 8 years, and I swore I'd never let them hurt me again. Boise was my fresh start, a place where the mountains didn't judge and the air felt cleaner than Seattle's ever did. I'd been here 8 years now, and I'd clawed my way into a life that was mine. Messy, imperfect, but real. I met Matt Donovan a few years back at a local art fair. He was this lanky guy with messy brown hair, standing in front of one of my photos, a black and white shot of the Sawtooth Range at dusk. "Whoever took this has a good eye," he said, grinning like he meant it. I laughed and told him, "Thanks, it's mine." We hit it off over coffee that turned into dinner, then dates, then a life together. He's 34 now, a high school history teacher who grades papers at our dining room table, surrounded by stacks of books and half-dead houseplants. We got married 4 years ago in a little park near our house, just us, a few friends, and a justice of the peace. No big fuss. Matt knew I didn't want anything that reminded me of my mom's over-the-top events. Then came Lily, our 3-year-old firecracker. She's got Matt's hazel eyes and my stubborn streak, always tearing through the house with sticky hands and a laugh that could melt ice. I make a living as a freelance photographer, mostly landscapes for travel blogs, sometimes a wedding or two when cash gets tight. Matt teaches online these days, his voice drifting through the house as he lectures about the Civil War or whatever. We're not rich, but we're happy. The kind of happy I didn't think I'd ever find after Seattle chewed me up and spat me out. That happiness got tested a couple weeks ago, though. I'd just found out I was pregnant again. 10 weeks along. Matt was over the moon, pacing the living room with this goofy grin, talking about turning the spare closet into a nursery. I was excited too, but nervous. Then last week everything fell apart. I'd been up late editing photos, stressing over a deadline, when this sharp pain hit my stomach. I tried to brush it off, but it got worse. Twisting, relentless. Matt found me curled up on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking. He drove me to the hospital, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The doctor's face said it all before she even opened her mouth. "I'm so sorry, Abby," she said, her voice soft. "You've had a miscarriage." I don't remember much after that, just the cold hospital bed, Matt holding my hand and this hollow ache that wouldn't let go. We got home a day later, and I've been moving through fog ever since. Lily keeps me going. She doesn't know what happened, just climbs into my lap and babbles about her day. But some nights I sit there staring at the wall, feeling like a piece of me got ripped away. Matt's been my rock, bringing me tea or just sitting with me in silence when I can't talk. He doesn't push, just waits until I'm ready to breathe again. That's when Dad's message landed, like a bomb in the middle of my grief. I was still raw, barely holding it together when those words lit up my phone. Come home for Christmas. It threw me off balance, dragged up all the hurt I'd buried under 8 years of dust. Matt caught me staring at the screen that night, Lily asleep upstairs, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice firm. "Not after what they did, and definitely not now." "I know," I said, but my head was a mess. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let them rot in Seattle with their fake nostalgia, but another part couldn't stop wondering, why reach out after all this time? Were they sick, broke, or just bored? I couldn't shake the feeling there was something they weren't saying. Matt leaned against the counter, watching me wrestle with it. "If you're even thinking about it, I'm not letting Lily anywhere near that mess unless we know what's up." He was right. Lily didn't deserve whatever drama they were cooking up, and neither did he. But I couldn't let it go. The next day, I did something crazy. I posted about it online, just dumped the whole story on a photography forum I hang out in. The disowning, the silence, the random invite. I half expected crickets, but the replies flooded in fast. "Don't go, they're just using you," one said. "Screw them, stay with your real family," another chimed in. A few thought I should hear them out, but most were team cut them off. Reading those strangers' words felt weirdly good, like I wasn't alone in this tangle. I sat there on our sagging couch, Lily's toys scattered across the floor, sipping cold coffee while Matt played blocks with her. The comments echoed in my head. "They don't deserve you." Maybe they were right, but that itch, that need to know why, wouldn't quit. I picked up my phone and typed back to Dad. "I'll think about it. Things are busy here." It was a dodge, a stall, but it bought me time to figure out what I really wanted. Trouble was, I didn't know if I was ready to face the answer, or the people who'd tossed me aside like I was nothing. I couldn't stop turning Dad's message over in my head, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "We miss you" sounded nice, but it didn't add up, not after 8 years of dead air. I'd spent too long dodging their shadows to buy the sentimental act now. Matt kept saying I didn't owe them a damn thing, and he was right, but that nagging itch wouldn't let me drop it. I needed answers, even if they hurt. So the next morning, while Lily napped and Matt graded papers in the other room, I grabbed my phone and called the one person who might know what was up. My Uncle Tom. Tom picked up on the third ring, his voice gravelly from years of smoking and shouting over machinery at his old mechanic shop. "Abby, kiddo, been a minute. You holding up okay?" He'd always been straight with me, ever since I showed up on his doorstep in Boise with a duffel bag and a chip on my shoulder. "Yeah, I'm managing," I said, skipping the miscarriage part. No point unloading that yet. "Listen, Tom, I got a weird message from Dad. He wants us in Seattle for Christmas. After all this time, you hear anything about that?" There was a long pause, just the faint clink of a wrench in the background. Then he sighed, heavy and tired. "Figures they'd pull this now. It's about your grandpa, Charles. He's 82, still kicking, but he's been shaking things up. Rewrote his will a few months back. Word is he told Richard and the rest they're out of the money unless they patch things up with you. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath catching. Wait, what? Grandpa Charles? The guy who didn't even send me a card when I graduated? Yep, Tom said. He's sitting on a couple million, old lumber money from way back. Guess he's feeling guilty or something. Wants the family whole again before he goes. Put the screws to him. Make nice with Abby or get nothing. I let out a bitter laugh, leaning back against the kitchen counter. So, that's it. They don't miss me, they miss Grandpa's cash. It stung, but it wasn't a surprise. Money always moved the Monroes more than feelings ever did. Tom grunted. Pretty much. Ethan's got some lawsuit hanging over his head. Botched surgery or something could cost him big. Sophie's divorce cleaned her out last year. And your folks? Well, they've been living high, but the firm's not what it used to be. They're scrambling. I paced the kitchen, the cold tile biting through my socks. Unbelievable. They think they can just wave a Christmas invite and I'll play along for their payday? Don't do it, Abs, Tom said, his tone sharp. They haven't changed. Same selfish bunch that sent you packing. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. It all clicked. Too perfectly. The timing, the sudden sweetness. I grabbed my laptop and started digging, pulling up Ethan's social media first. There he was, still posting pics of his fancy condo and his kids in private school uniforms, but the comments hinted at trouble. Heard you're selling the boat? Tough times? Sophie's page was next. Divorced, sure enough, with shots of her new apartment, smaller than the house she'd bragged about before. Mom and Dad's profiles were all charity dinners and fake smiles, but the cracks showed if you looked close. Fewer trips, older cars. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tight. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out because they had to. I picked up my phone again and fired off a reply to Dad. Thanks for the invite, but we're staying in Boise, busy with Lily and work. Short. Done. I figured that'd be the end of it. Then the phone rang 2 days later, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Hello? Abigail? The voice was shaky, old, familiar in a way that sent a chill down my spine. It's your grandpa, Charles. I froze, clutching the edge of the sink. How'd you even get this number? Doesn't matter, he said, brushing it off. I owe you an apology, girl. 8 years is too long. I should have been there. Your graduation, your wedding, that little one of yours. I'm ashamed of what the family did, how they turned on you. I didn't say anything, just let him ramble, waiting for the catch, and it came quick. I'm fixing the will, he went on. You're in it now, Abby. You deserve it more than they do. But I've got to say it bothers me that your girl, Lily, right, doesn't carry the Monroe name. Family legacy's worth something, you know. That did it. My blood went hot and I cut him off, my voice low and sharp. What did you just say? He stammered. What? I just meant... No, I snapped. You don't get to call me after 8 years and judge my family. Lily's a Donovan because Matt and I chose it. Legal reasons, not that it's your business. You think you can buy me back with money and guilt? You're as bad as they are. Abby, I didn't mean... He started, but I was already done. Take your legacy and shove it, I said, my voice rising. I don't need your cash and I don't need you. I hung up, slamming the phone down so hard it skidded across the counter. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't just anger. It was relief. like I'd finally cut a rope that had been choking me for years. They weren't sorry, they were desperate, and I wasn't their damn lifeline. I sank into a chair, staring out at the mountains as the sun dipped low. Matt walked in, took one look at me, and didn't ask, just pulled me into a hug. "You okay?" he murmured. "Better now," I said, and I meant it, but deep down I knew this wasn't over. People like them don't slink away when there's money on the line, and I'd just lit a match they wouldn't ignore. Christmas came and went in Boise, quiet and simple, the way I liked it. Matt and I strung lights on a scrappy pine we'd hauled home from the lot down the road, Lily giggling as she tangled herself in tinsel. We kept it low-key. Gingerbread cookies, a few gifts, the three of us curled up watching old cartoons. It was the kind of peace I'd fought for, and for a couple days I let myself believe I'd shut the door on Seattle for good. My phone stayed silent after that blowout with Grandpa Charles, and I figured they'd gotten the hint. I was wrong. 2 days after Christmas, I was in the living room, sipping tea and sorting through a pile of Lily's toys, when the mail slot clattered. Matt was out back with Lily, her squeals drifting through the window as he pushed her on the swing. I shuffled over to the door, expecting a late holiday card or a bill. Instead, I found a thick envelope with no return address, my name scrawled in sharp black ink. My gut twisted as I tore it open. Inside was a letter from some lawyer, crisp letterhead, all formal, and a stack of photos. Me at the grocery store with Lily, Matt walking her to daycare, our house from across the street. My hands shook as I flipped through them, each shot a little stab of ice in my chest. Someone had been watching us. The letter was short. "As Monroe, we represent Charles Monroe. He requests your presence in Seattle to discuss inheritance terms. Failure to comply may result in further action." Further action? I dropped the envelope like it was burning, my breath coming fast. They'd hired a damn PI to tail me? My own family, creeping into my life like thieves? I grabbed my phone and dialed Mom's number, the one I hadn't touched in years. She picked up on the second ring, her voice all honey and fake surprise. "Abby, sweetheart, I didn't expect—" "Cut the crap," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "You've got people following me, taking pictures of my kid? What the hell is wrong with you?" There was a pause, then a sigh. Like I was the one being unreasonable. "Abby, calm down. We just needed to know you're okay. Your grandfather's serious about the will, and we can't afford to lose everything. Ethan's lawsuit, Sophie's debts. It's been hard. We need this." I laughed, harsh and jagged. "You need this? You think stalking my family's going to make me play along? You're disgusting." "Abby, please," she said, her tone shifting to that pleading note she used to win arguments. "We're trying to fix things for all of us. The firm's struggling, and your father's health isn't what it used to be. We can't keep up appearances without help." "Appearances," I spat. "That's all you've ever cared about. You threw me out to save your precious image, and now you're begging because the money's drying up. I'm not your ATM." She started to say something else, but I hung up, my hands trembling so bad I could barely hit the button. I sank onto the couch, the photos scattered around me like evidence in a crime scene. Matt came in a minute later, Lily toddling behind him, and stopped dead when he saw my face. "Abs, what's going on?" I held up the pictures, my voice barely steady. "They're watching us. Grandpa's will. It's $1 million on the line, and they're desperate enough to pull this." His jaw clenched, and he scooped Lily up, holding her close. That's it. We're done with them. Locks, cameras, whatever it takes. I'm not letting them near us. I nodded, still reeling when the doorbell rang. My heart slammed against my ribs. Matt set Lily down and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. "It's a woman," he muttered, glancing back at me. "Looks like you." My stomach dropped. I pushed past him and yanked the door open. There she was. Sophie, my twin, standing on my porch in the Boise drizzle. Her hair was plastered to her face, her coat soaked through, but those sharp green eyes were the same ones I'd stared down 8 years ago. "Abby," she said, her voice soft, "can we talk?" "What are you doing here?" I snapped, blocking the doorway. "Come to spy in person?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not with them. Not anymore. I left Nate years ago, right after high school. I've been trying to get out from under Mom and Dad ever since." I snorted. "Sure you have. Why should I believe a word you say?" She took a step closer, her hands up like she was surrendering. "Because I lied, Abby. Back then they made me. Mom and Dad told me to say you attacked me out of nowhere, said it'd ruin the family if people knew about Nate. I was 17, scared and stupid. I've hated myself for it every day since." I stared at her, the words hitting like a slap. "You're saying they set me up? That it wasn't just you?" "They wanted you gone," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't fit their picture, and I was their excuse. I didn't know they'd cut you off like that. I thought you'd come back. When I found out about the PI, I told them I was done. I drove straight here to tell you the truth." My head spun, the ground tilting under me. All this time, I'd blamed her, hated her, but she'd been their pawn too? I wanted to scream, to shove her off my porch and never look back. "You expect me to forgive you?" I said, my voice low and raw. "After everything?" "No," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know." "I'm sorry, Abby, for all of it." I stood there, rain dripping off the roof, my chest tight with too many things. Anger, shock, a flicker of something I couldn't name. "Get out," I said finally. "I don't need your sorry. I don't need any of you." She nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face, and turned away, disappearing into the gray. I slammed the door, leaning against it as my knees buckled. Matt was there in a second, pulling me into his arms. "What'd she say?" he asked, his voice tight. "They lied," I choked out. "All of them. Even more than I thought." I buried my face in his chest, the weight of it crashing down. Sophie's confession didn't fix anything. It just made the betrayal deeper, uglier, and now they were circling like vultures, ready to pick at whatever was left. But I wasn't breaking, not for them, not ever again. After Sophie left, the house felt too small, like the walls were pressing in with every breath. I stood there by the door, rain still tapping against the windows, Matt's arms around me while Lily babbled in the background, oblivious to the storm that had just blown through. My head was a mess. Sophie's words, those creepy photos, Mom's voice begging on the phone. It was all too much, piling on top of the grief I was already carrying from losing the baby. But as I leaned into Matt, feeling his steady heartbeat against me, something clicked. I was done letting them pull my strings, done letting their chaos bleed into my world. That night, we got to work. Matt dug out his laptop, and we locked down everything. Facebook, Instagram, my photography site, all of it. Private settings, blocked numbers, the works. I deleted every trace of us they might sniff out, my fingers shaking as I hit each button. It wasn't fear driving me, it was fury, and a kind of fierce relief. Lily was asleep upstairs, her little snores drifting down, and I kept picturing those photos of her in some stranger's hands. No way was I letting them anywhere near her. Matt's parents texted us later, saying they'd done the same with their accounts. "We're not touching that mess," his mom wrote. "You're our family, not them." I smiled at that, a real one, feeling a little less alone. The next day, I sat on the couch, staring at the clutter of Lily's toys, plastic trucks and blocks strewn across the rug like a battlefield. Matt was in the kitchen, humming off-key as he tried not to burn dinner, the smell of spaghetti sauce wafting through the house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my last few client emails, then paused. I'd just finished a small photo gig for a local travel blog. Nothing huge, but it had brought in a couple $100. I thought about those pictures of Lily, the lawyer's threat, Grandpa's money dangling like a rotten carrot. Then I got up, grabbed my laptop, and sent an email to a women's shelter downtown. "Here's a donation," I wrote, attaching the payment details. "Use it for someone who needs it." It wasn't much, but it felt like washing their dirt off my hands. New Year's Eve rolled around a few days later, and the air in Boise turned sharp and cold. Matt and I bundled up, wrapping Lily in a puffy jacket that made her waddle like a penguin. We stepped out onto the back porch, the mountains looming dark against a sky starting to spit snow. Lily squealed, stretching her mittened hands to catch the flakes, her laugh cutting through the quiet. Matt slid his fingers through mine, his grip warm and solid. "We're gonna be okay, right?" he asked, his breath fogging in the chill. I looked at him, his messy hair dusted with snow, those hazel eyes steady as ever, and felt something settle inside me. "Yeah," I said, squeezing his hand back. "We're going to be just fine." Lily squirmed between us, her weight a comfort against my chest, and I knew it was true. This was my family, Matt, Lily, the life we'd built brick by stubborn brick. Not the Monroes with their lies and their greed. They could keep their money, their schemes, their fake apologies. I didn't need any of it. I knew they wouldn't quit that easy, though. $1 million on the table, they'd dig, they'd pry, maybe send more letters, hire another PI, show up with crocodile tears. I could see it already. Mom wringing her hands at some charity lunch, plotting her next move. Ethan flexing his doctor swagger to track me down. Sophie hovering on the edges, torn but too late to matter. Let them try. I wasn't the scared 17-year-old they'd dumped anymore. I'd built something stronger than they could ever break, and if they stepped one foot into my world again, I'd shove them right back out. We stayed on the porch a while longer, watching the snow blanket the yard, the mountains fading into the dark. Matt pulled me closer, Lily nestled between us, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The past was still out there, lurking like a shadow, but it couldn't touch us. Not here, not now. I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window as we headed back inside, a silent promise to myself. I'd fight for this tooth and nail, no matter what came next. The door clicked shut behind us, locking the cold and the ghosts outside. Dinner was waiting, Lily's toys were still a mess, and Matt was already teasing me about my terrible taste in holiday movies. It was ordinary, messy, perfect, and it was mine. Whatever storm was brewing back in Seattle, I'd face it head on, not because I had to, but because I knew I could. They'd never see it coming, and that was just fine with me.